I knew when I was drinking maple syrup out of the bottle, I had a problem. I'd always had a sweet tooth, but my cravings were definitely getting next level. I also wasn't sleeping through the night. And on the rare night I was getting enough sleep, I would still wake up feeling tired. And then there was the random dizziness I would feel on and off that I just chalked up to a lack of sleep and secretly prayed was not a tumor. But as hard as I tried to pretend things were just fine, that my hormones had not shifted yet again, and that my weight gain was all in my head, because all my pants at the time were stretchy, on purpose, when it came time to try on a pair of my favorite short shorts for the summer, I could deny it no longer. Either I had swallowed a marshmallow the size of a small stool, or something was wrong. If you're experiencing symptoms like chronic fatigue, difficulty sleeping, uncontrollable salt or sugar cravings, and unexplained weight gain, all while feeling tired and wired, then you might have adrenal fatigue too. But while many functional medicine doctors consider adrenal fatigue to be the most common hormone imbalance in women in midlife, it's far from without controversy. In fact, most traditional medicine doctors don't even recognize it exists. More on that in a minute. So grab a notepad and a quick potty break, because I'll be back in less than 90 seconds to unpack it all. Welcome to Are You There Midlife? It's me, Monica. Hi, I'm Monica Topetti, wife, mom, health coach, and hormone imbalance survivor. And I'm on a mission to help women in midlife balance hormones naturally without drugs, doctors, or divorce. Are you tired of dealing with heavy, painful periods that look like a crime scene? Are you sick of struggling with anxiety, fatigue, or brain fog that... What was I just saying? Are you frustrated doing all the things to lose weight but still packing on pounds faster than a real housewife changes Birkins? Girl, you are in the right place. Join me each week as I spill the tea on what to expect in perimenopause and beyond. From IBS to insomnia, bloating to funky body odor, I'll unpack all the weird stuff happening inside our midlife bodies, plus give you the latest science and holistic solutions to manage it all. So ditch the Spanx and hop on board the Hot Mess Express. Let's do this. Hey beautiful, welcome back to the show. So today I am continuing my 6 weeks to summer podcast series and pulling back the curtain on the number one hidden cause of hormonal weight gain in women, adrenal fatigue. To recap, in episodes 12 through 14 of this series, we discussed 2 of the top 7 hormonal imbalances in women in perimenopause through postmenopause: estrogen dominance and hypothyroidism. I also shared how 99% of all weight loss resistance can be traced to a hormonal cause, along with specific tips on balancing estrogen, progesterone, and thyroid hormone levels to get the scale moving. Now, in case you missed any of those episodes, I'll go ahead and link them in the show notes. In today's episode, we are going to talk all about the adrenals. Specifically, what is the function of the adrenals and what are the 2 critical hormones it produces? The differences between high cortisol and adrenal fatigue, and what causes levels to be too high or too low. Some of the symptoms associated with a cortisol imbalance, and what kind of test is best for measuring cortisol. And I'll also break down the connection between adrenal function, cortisol, blood sugar imbalance, and weight gain. Plus, I'm going to be sharing 3 of my favorite fast fixes to balance cortisol levels just in time for summer. So find a comfy spot and chill with me for the next 20 or so. I promise your adrenals will thank you as we stir the tea on all things cortisol. Impaired adrenal function. What the heck is it? So, the adrenal glands are these two pretty little pearl-like glands that sit on top of the kidneys, and they produce the main hormones of stress, which are cortisol and DHEA. As we discussed back in episode 12, cortisol imbalance can manifest in one of two ways in the body, either high cortisol or adrenal fatigue. Now, both high cortisol and adrenal fatigue can occur when your body is experiencing an extremely high level of stress or is not properly managing stress. So, in a healthy body, the adrenal glands respond to stress by producing the hormone cortisol. It's known as the flight or fight hormone to a lot of you. However, when stress is extremely high or chronic, cortisol is constantly being released, and this can result in high levels of cortisol in the blood. Now, eventually, going at this pace, your adrenals actually become overexerted to the point where they're unable to produce the necessary levels of cortisol to keep up with your body's demand. This is known as adrenal fatigue. Now, there are three important things that I want to note here regarding adrenal fatigue and high cortisol. Super, super important. The first has to do with the term adrenal fatigue. Traditional medicine does not recognize this term. And in fact, many doctors do not believe that adrenal fatigue even exists. This is primarily because in traditional blood tests, people with adrenal fatigue are typically going to have cortisol levels that fall within normal range. So normal levels, but not optimal. Now I'll talk about more on testing in just a minute. But it's important to note that if you suspect you have adrenal dysfunction, but your lab tests, your blood tests have come back normal, be sure to check out episode 2 and 5 regarding hormone testing, and I'll go ahead and link those in the show notes as well. Now, high cortisol and adrenal fatigue should not be confused with something called adrenal insufficiency or Addison's disease. This is actually a rare autoimmune disease that affects about 1 in 100,000 people in the US. Addison's is very difficult to diagnose, and it often requires multiple blood tests of your sodium, your potassium, your cortisol, and something called your ACTH hormone levels. Some doctors will also run a CT scan of your stomach, and in some cases, an insulin-induced hypoglycemia test. Lastly, it's important to understand that your adrenals don't actually become tired of producing cortisol, okay? That's kind of a misnomer, that name. But what really is happening is your cortisol production becomes depleted. This can be both a positive and a negative. The positive is that God created this miraculous machine we call the human body that can actually make cortisol from other stuff. The negative is that your body steals another hormone called progesterone and turns that into cortisol. Now, most women start to deal with fluctuating and decreasing levels of progesterone during perimenopause. So, women with adrenal issues often will go on to experience something known as progesterone deficiency, which is a primary contributor to estrogen dominance. So if you're dealing with both estrogen dominance and adrenal fatigue, it's very important to focus on getting your adrenals repaired first before trying to balance your progesterone or estrogen levels. So what causes this? It's biological and environmental. So let me explain the biological cause. During perimenopause, our ovaries slow the estrogen and progesterone production that take place there. And our body kind of hands the baton over to our adrenals. So our adrenals slowly start taking over hormone production. But when additional stress is put on our adrenals, in particular, certain dietary and lifestyle factors increase the risk of developing high cortisol or adrenal fatigue. So, what are some of those environmental factors? The first are dietary factors. So, consuming too much caffeine or alcohol. Do you do that? Eating lots of processed refined carbs or high sugar snacks and beverages. Check, check. Nutrient deficiencies caused by you're not eating enough protein, you're not eating enough healthy fats, you're not eating enough carbs like fruits and vegetables that are rich in necessary vitamins, or maybe you're just eating too little calories. You've gained all this weight, so you decide to starve yourself, and now your adrenals are even in more disrepair because it's lacking, your body is lacking nutritional deficiencies or lacking nutrition. Or you're eating foods that you have a food sensitivity or intolerance to. Now, we're going to talk more about this in a future episode, but essentially, as time goes on, we develop hormonal sensitivities to certain foods that can trigger inflammation and, in particular, certain hormonal imbalances. And so, if you continue to eat those foods that you have an intolerance or sensitivity to, you can create inflammation and you can put stress on your adrenals. The second set of factors is more related to your lifestyle. So these include sleep deprivation. Are you getting less than 7 to 8 hours of sleep most nights? You're definitely putting undue stress on your adrenals. Are you living a high stress lifestyle or living with chronic stress? A lot of women that I talk to, when I ask them about their stress level, they're like, well, I guess it's fine. I mean, I've been dealing with all of these things for a while. And then we start to unpack all of the things, and it's like, well, I have this really stressful job, and I have 2 teenagers at home, and I have an adult child who's going through, trying to get married, or is out of work and is coming home to live with us, or has just had a baby, and my husband has dealt with some health issues, and I'm a caregiver to my parent who is, dealing with dementia or some, other illness of age, and they just go on and on and on with this laundry list of symptoms, but they've been dealing with it for so long they don't even realize or recognize the amount of stress that it's caused in their life because it's become the norm. Other factors include exposure to environmental toxins in your personal care products, your household products, your cleaning products, over exercise, or just exercise stress. There's literally certain types of exercise that are not good if you are dealing with adrenal fatigue or excess cortisol. We'll talk about that in a minute. Negative thinking, emotional trauma, and PTSD. A lot of people who had early childhood trauma have found to be developing or sensitive to developing adrenal fatigue later in life. And then lastly, chronic pain or surgery, which obviously causes extreme stress on the body. So how do you know if you have high cortisol or adrenal fatigue? There's a lot of symptoms that could fall under both imbalances, and often a lot of my clients will have symptoms that fall within both categories. Although every woman experiences symptoms of high cortisol and adrenal fatigue differently, here is the laundry list of symptoms that you could be experiencing with one of these imbalances. Constant fatigue, especially in the morning, after just getting up, or after exercise. Decreased libido. Unexplained hair loss. Headaches. Memory issues. Trouble falling or staying asleep. Depression, often caused by constant fatigue, weakness, or the ability to cope with stress. Night sweats, irritability, anxiety, or social anxiety. Muscle wasting or weakness. Thinning or papery skin. Blood sugar imbalances, like you get shaky if you don't eat regularly. Irregular menstrual cycles, fibrocystic breasts, or infertility. Allergies or asthma. Intolerance to cold or heat. Decreased immunity, meaning you get frequent bouts of the flu or colds, or it takes you a while to fully recover. Low blood pressure, slow metabolism, and decreased thyroid function. Feeling wired and tired, like you just can't relax. Difficulty concentrating and or dizziness. Dark circles under the eyes. Digestive issues that can include constipation, IBS, abdominal pain, nausea, diarrhea, or vomiting. Cravings for salty, sugary, or fatty foods. Heart palpitations, panic attacks, or difficulty coping with stress. Frequent urination, lower back pain, extremely sensitive skin, early onset perimenopause, so that would be your early 30s, would be early onset to mid 30s, and lastly, weight gain, especially in the midsection. Wow, that's a mouthful. So, how do we diagnose low cortisol or high cortisol? Saliva tests, not traditional blood tests, are generally considered the best test for measuring your cortisol levels. This is because your cortisol levels are constantly fluctuating. So it's best to get several cortisol samples in one given day so you can establish a baseline and then compare the fluctuations in cortisol to your baseline number. If you're getting several blood tests in one day, that definitely can be a little bit painful and prohibitive. So saliva is generally the way to go. Now, saliva tests are available through many out-of-pocket providers like functional medicine doctors or naturopaths, or even at-home lab testing. You can also take an online hormone symptom profiling assessment like the one I offer. So, no actual testing. It's more of taking the symptoms that you're experiencing and seeing if you are experiencing enough, a preponderance of symptoms to constitute adrenal fatigue or elevated cortisol. And if you're interested in taking my quiz, you can just click the link in the show notes after this episode. It's a 5-minute quiz. It's free, and it'll give you the results that you're looking for, or at least open a dialogue with you and your doctor. One word of caution. In general, saliva tests are actually considered less reliable than blood tests. So it's the best test for cortisol, but saliva tests in general are generally less reliable than blood tests. Why? Number one, because samples can be easily contaminated. And number two, there are several outside factors like certain foods or beverages you consume, or even oral hygiene products that can actually affect your saliva test results. So just keep that in mind. Now, what if I don't do anything? Can my cortisol levels just resolve on their own? I am not going to lie. Recovery for adrenal fatigue can take a while. And while the best approach is to make solid changes to your lifestyle for lasting results, full adrenal recovery can take from 6 to 9 months for minor adrenal fatigue and up to 24 months for severe adrenal fatigue. If you don't do anything, then there's some other conditions that can develop, and those include hypothyroidism, estrogen dominance, endometriosis, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain syndrome, fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, autoimmune diseases, diabetes, and metabolic syndrome. And lastly, how does high cortisol or adrenal fatigue impact your weight? There are 4 different ways impaired adrenal function can cause fat storage, increased belly fat, and difficulty losing weight. Number one way is by increasing cortisol levels. So when our adrenal glands experience long-term stress, the cortisol levels in our blood increase, right? High cortisol levels in turn increase glucose levels in our blood. And it's that glucose which is stored as fat if it's not used immediately for energy. Fat cells, especially those around our waistline, actually have multiple cortisol receptors. So that can kind of create this vicious cycle of stress and fat storage, stress and fat storage, stress and fat storage, right around our middle. High cortisol levels can also cause cravings for unhealthy food, particularly salty or sugary foods. And that, of course, can lead to overeating and overconsumption of calories. The second way that high cortisol or adrenal fatigue can impact your weight is by raising insulin levels. So elevated cortisols in the blood also can lead to higher blood sugar levels. And higher blood sugar levels actually triggers our pancreas to release insulin. And insulin is the hormone that instructs our body to store fat. So more cortisol equals higher blood sugar equals higher insulin equals more fat storage. Womp womp. The third way that adrenal fatigue and high cortisol can contribute to weight gain is via adrenal rhythms. Adrenal what? Okay, let me explain. When the adrenal gland's circadian rhythms are disrupted, they can have trouble producing enough energy and blood sugar in the morning. So you wake up feeling super tired, and that leads you to turn to like sugary drinks and caffeine and carbs for quick energy, which in turn increases your belly fat. Okay, we're seeing a cycle here. We're seeing a picture of how this is happening, right? And the fourth way that adrenal fatigue and high cortisol can impact your weight is via your metabolism. So when we have any kind of impaired adrenal function, this can lead to an increase in reverse T3. Now, reverse T3 is a hormone that is produced by your thyroid, and we talked all about thyroid hormones and hypothyroidism back in episode 15. I'll go ahead and link that in the show notes as well. But basically, an increase in reverse T3 can slow down your metabolism by binding to your thyroid receptors, which of course impacts your ability to lose weight. Okay, so in just a minute, getting to the good stuff, I'm going to share with you 3 of my favorite tips that you can start implementing today to correct a cortisol imbalance, soothe your adrenals, and get rid of cortisol belly. But first, are you tired of being dismissed by your doctor or told your hormonal symptoms are just part of getting older? Are you frustrated by blood tests that keep coming back normal, even though you feel anything but? Are you finally ready to put the kibosh on frustrating symptoms and feel confident in your body again? Then if you haven't done it already, click the link in my show notes and take the free hormone quiz. Developed by 3 functional medicine doctors, this self-assessment uses hormone symptom profiling to evaluate your age, menstrual cycle, and symptoms for 7 of the most common hormonal imbalances in perimenopause through postmenopause, including elevated cortisol and adrenal fatigue. Remember, there's at least 34 documented symptoms of perimenopause and menopause. So even if you don't have high cortisol or adrenal fatigue, it's possible you could be dealing with another hormonal imbalance or imbalances. This quiz is quick, It's easy and it's scary accurate. And best of all, it's going to give you the clarity you need to finally understand which of your hormones are out of whack so you can start to balance them naturally. Summer's just 3 weeks away, ladies. What are you waiting for? Click the link. Okay, so what can you do today if you're dealing with high cortisol or adrenal fatigue? Now, I know I'm beginning to sound like a broken record in this series, but it's super important that you understand in order to rebalance your hormones, put your symptoms into remission, and jumpstart your weight loss, you need a holistic approach. This is a full body, full lifestyle approach that optimizes your hormone production while returning your body to a state of homeostasis or body in balance. How do we do this? We do this by focusing on a diet rich in hormone healing foods and low in chemicals, hormones, and other dietary stressors. We integrate strategic lifestyle changes like blood sugar stabilization, targeted supplementation, sleep optimization, stress management, and hormone optimizing exercise, as well as prioritizing gut and liver health and eliminating environmental stressors like endocrine disruptors. I'm going to unpack exactly what this looks like in a future episode. But for now, here are 3 quick lifestyle changes you can make today to start healing your adrenals. Are you ready? Number 1 has to do with your diet. So here's what I want you to do, ladies. I want you to reduce or remove all nutritional stressors from your diet. What does that mean? A nutritional stressor is, number 1, a GMO, which is a genetically modified food. Those can be found in soy products. Those can be found in corn products, zucchini squash. There's a lot of foods that are high in GMOs. So get out and Google which foods contain GMOs and make sure to remove them from your diet. Number 2, sugar and all artificial sugar. That means coconut sugar. That means agave. That means honey. That means Splenda. Okay? All of it except for monk fruit and stevia. Also, I want you to eliminate all artificial additives, flavors, and preservatives. So check the labels on anything that you buy in a can, in a bottle, in a box. Anything that is processed doesn't mean that it will contain artificial additives, flavors, and preservatives, but a lot of those foods do. Also, I want you to eliminate excess alcohol, especially any high sugar drinks, so no pina coladas, or any cocktails with tonic water, super high in sugar. And then lastly, any foods that are common causes of food sensitivities, which are typically gluten, grains, cow dairy, and yeast. Take it all out. Do it for 3 weeks, just 3 weeks, and see how you feel. Okay, number 2, the second thing I want you to do is supplement. I don't like to supplement for supplement's sake, but there are certain supplements that have been proven by several research studies to really help with adrenal fatigue and elevated cortisol. And one of those is ashwagandha. Now, ashwagandha is an adaptogenic herb, or adaptogen, you may have heard it called. And it helps to lower cortisol levels and mediate the stress response within your body. It's thought to act directly on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or HPA, and that controls the release of stress hormones like cortisol from the adrenal glands. Note, women with a diagnosed autoimmune disease, or if you've got a known allergy to like ragweed or grass, don't take ashwagandha because it can trigger an allergic response. So I just want to give you a heads up. You should always talk to your doctor before taking any supplement or pharmacist to make sure that it's not going to interact with any of your existing medications. But just a heads up for those of you who do have known allergies. Ashwagandha is great. I've had very few clients that have not been able to take it, but just a heads up. Also, as I mentioned in the last episode of this series, not all supplements are created equal. Heck, I did a whole series on supplementation. But in a recent test by Consumer Labs of 10 different ashwagandha supplements, 8 out of 10 supplements they tested failed. They failed. Primarily, they failed because there was inaccurate dosages listed on the label. But just like a medication, dosage is critical. It could be the difference between a supplement working or not working. Now, there's a couple supplements that contain ashwagandha that are my favorites. The first is Cortisol Manager by Integrative Therapeutics. I love this. It's a blend of ashwagandha and theanine and a couple of other things, and it really helps relax your sympathetic nervous system and helps you aid in restful sleep. So you're going to want to take that an hour or so before you go to bed. The other ashwagandha only supplement that I love, and actually was a top pick according to Consumer Labs, I have included in my collection of hormone balancing supplements. So if you click the link in my show notes, not only will you see all of the supplements that I recommend, but you can also get a 5% discount on any hormone balancing supplements you order. Lastly, number 3 is exercise. I want you to perform some form of restorative exercise for 20 to 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. So what do I mean by restorative exercise? Specifically, walking, yoga, water aerobics, swimming, more restful types of martial arts like Tai Chi. These types of exercise reduce your stress naturally. They also increase your blood flow. They reduce depression. They normalize your levels of cortisol, insulin, blood glucose, growth hormones, and thyroid. Huge. And generally, those make you feel good, right? Now, if you have adrenal fatigue or high cortisol, I want you to avoid endurance cardio or really high impact cardio. So that would be running, that would be CrossFit, that would be spin or Orange Theory classes, or even like heavy intense powerlifting. Because these types of exercises can send your cortisol levels soaring, and that's just going to do more damage than healing. In the next episode of this series, I am going to be taking a deep dive into polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. This is the silent hormone imbalance that affects at least 1 in every 10 women of reproductive age in the U.S. So you're going to want to make sure that you check out that episode. Until then, keep your chin up and your cortisol down. Hey friend, can I call you friend? Because I already feel like we're friends in my head. Did this podcast teach you something, make you laugh, or feel less like an alien? If so, I would be so incredibly grateful if you could take just 60 seconds to rate, review, and subscribe. That is the number one way you can thank me and support the show. Until next week, stay cool and keep away from sharp objects.